Horticulture, fashion and craft. Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. I'm so sorry for taking this long to upload the skirt part of my dress. I am making a dress. The dress has half length. I have already made a detailed video on the cutting and sewing of the half length. I'm going to put the link in the description box below. You can check it out as well. Today's tutorial is going to be on the skirt part. I'm going to be showing us on how to use the protruding buttocks method to draft your skirt, and I'm also going to show us on how to drape on your skirt using tulle nets. My full gown length is 64 inches. My half length is 18 inches, and the skirt length that I'll be working with is 46 inches. My waist measurement is 42 inches divided by 4 is 10.5. I'm going to be adding 1 inch that allowance to it, which will give me 11.5 inches. My hip measurement is 51 inches. 51 divided by 4 is 12.75. Because I'm using the protruding buttocks method, the formula is going to be different. I'm going to alter the measurement on the hip only. The waist measurement remains the same. We normally divide our measurement by 4 and we will share it equally for the front and the back bodies. Because I'm using the protruding buttocks method, I'm going to alter the measurement from the hip. My front hip measurement is supposed to be 12.75, while the back hip measurement is supposed to be 12.75. But for this method, which is protruding buttocks method, I'm going to minus half an inch from the front hip, which will give me 12.25. Then this half an inch that I minus from the front, I'm going to add it back to the back bodies, which will be 12.75 plus 0.5, which will give me 13.25. Let me go over it again. Wherever your hip measurement is divided by 4, and the answer you get, you will write front hip 12.75, back hip 12.75. Then you come to the front, you are going to minus half an inch from the front. This half an inch that you minus from the front, you will add it to the back. After that, you will now add these two together. Whatever figure it gives you, you will times it by 2. Reason why you are timesing it by 2 is because you have front bodies and back bodies to make up a full skirt. Then whatever figure it gives you, it must tally with your hip measurement. As you can see, after all the calculation, the figure it gives me, it tallies with my hip measurement. This works for any hip measurement at all, whether your hip is 40, 45, 43, 50, it works the same. Just try it out and you will see you will have exactly same measurement for your hip. So let's move to the work table. My fabric is folded into 2, as you can see. This is the front skirt. This is my starting line. This 1 inch is the same allowance that I'm going to use to join with the half length. This is my starting line. My waist measurement is 42 inches. 42 divided by 4 is 10.5 plus 1 inch that allowance is 11.5 inches. This is 11.5 inches. From my half length to my hip is 11 inches. Whatever yours is, make sure that you impute it. If I'm making a skirt, I normally use 9 inches from my waist to my hip, but because this is a dress, my half length is 18 inches, so the skirt part is going to go up more than the normal waist measurement for my skirts. The calculation I showed us earlier, I'll be using 12.25 for this front skirts. So I'll move over to my hip line. I'm going to measure 12.25. I'm going to minus 2 inches from this 12.25, which will be 10.25. I'm going to impute 10.25 on the lower part of the skirts. Then with my straight ruler, I'm going to connect it straight down to the lower part of the skirts. Then after that, I'm going to add my seam allowance, 1.5 inches. The reason why I'm adding 1.5 inches is because I always like to turn my skirt with lining by the side with 1/2 inch. Then I'll be left with 1 inch to join the front and the back bodies together. So I'm going to add 1.5 inches seam allowance on the waist, on the hip as well, 1.5 inches seam allowance. I'll continue with 1.5 inches seam allowance straight down. For my waist dart, I'm going to measure 4.5. I'm going to measure 1/2 inch. I'm going to extend the line to the seam allowance. Then I will notch it. I'm going to extend these lines as well to the seam allowance. I'm going to notch the 4.5 inches darts and the 1/2 inch on the sides. So the next thing to do is to cut it out. This is my front skirt, so I'm going to fold over for the back bodies. This is the back bodies. It is folded into 2, as you can see. So I'm going to place the front on it. This is my hip line. I'm going to rule a straight line. I said for the back, I want my hip to be 13.25. So I'm going to come over to this hip line. I'm going to measure 13.25. the waist remains the same. I'm going to connect from this waist to the hip. I'll connect this way, dotted line, to the hip. The waist remains the same. From this hip, I'm going to measure 10 inches. Then I'll connect it like this to the 10 inches. You blend it up. To measure my zipper allowance, I always like to use 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. I'm going to place my tape measure on this line to measure the zipper allowance. 1.5 inches, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, all through. Then after that, I'm going to connect the lines together. As you can see, if you look at the zipper allowance closely, if you look at the shape, you will see that it has formed the shape of a buttocks. This is how human buttocks is. Our buttocks is not straight like pencil. Our buttocks have shape and curve, and the skirt has already formed the shape already. This is the method I normally use to draft my skirt, and it always works fine for me. So I'm going to cut it out. The side seam remains the same. I'm going to maintain this side seam. You know, we've added 1.5 inches already, so I'm going to be tracing this while cutting out. I'm going to be cutting exactly the same shape at the side. Then for the back, I'm going to cut out this shape for the back. Then I'm going to notch where my zipper allowance will be. So let's cut it out. The sides remain the same. Then next thing to do, I'll notch the zipper allowance. I'm going to notch the dart for the back as well. I'm going to use the front to notch the dart for the back. So I'm going to use this fabric to cut on the lining. You can see I've sewn my darts. This is the front bodies of the skirts. I have 2 nets for the draping. I'm going to be draping with these 2 nets. You can use any fabric of your choice to drape, but I'm using a tulle net, and I have 2 yards of it. I have 2 yards of it by 60. So the next thing I'm going to do, with my needle and thread, I'll move over to the edge. I'm going to sew loose stitches. With my needle and thread, I'm going to sew loose stitches to form gathers. my drape to start from the right side and fall towards my left side. So the next thing I'm going to do, remember that this is a dress and I'm going to be using 1 inch to join with the upper body. So I'm going to mark the 1 inch that I'm going to use to join the half length. Then from this 1 inch, I'm going to measure 5 inches downward. This 5 inches is not standard. You can make use of 3 inches or 2 inches. You can make use of 6, 7 inches, even up to 10 inches. It depends on your choice. So then, I'm also going to mark 1 inch away from the edge. This 1 inch is what I'll be using to join with the upper part. From these 5 inches, I'm going to also measure 5 inches. So in between this, my draping is going to start from these 5 inches and end here. So I'm going to pin it down. After that, you arrange your pleats nicely and make it to be as small as possible. I'm going to place it on the 1 inch. Then I'm going to pin it down. No basic measurement for it. You can bring this side as low as possible and slant it to the upper part. It doesn't have a specific measurement. It depends on your preference. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take to my sewing machine. I'm going to stitch this tulle net to the fabric. I'll also move to this other side as well. I'm going to stitch this side to the fabric as well. Then I'm going to cut it out. Let me quickly sew it and show us the next step to take. This remaining fabric that I cut out, as you can see the remaining length, I'm going to place it this way. I'll take to my sewing machine and stitch it down as well. I've attached it to it, as you can see. So by the time I use my lining to turn it, it will be like this at the end of the day. So while it's still facing this side, so I'm going to take my lining. The length of the lining is 2 inches shorter than the fabric. I've sewn my dart on the lining as well, as you can see. So the next thing to do, I'm going to place the right side of the lining and the fabric facing each other. Then I'll take to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew 1/2 inch straight down. Then I'm going to turn the sides with lining as well. Then I've sewn the lining to the fabric with 1/2 inch, as you can see. Remember that I told us that the lining is shorter in length by 2 inches than the fabric. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pull the lining. I'm going to pull it to be equal with the waist. When you pull the lining, you will notice that the fabric will come over to the front. You will adjust it. Let me turn it over this way. I'm going to tuck in this net this way. Then I'm going to pull the lining to be equal with the waist. As you can see, it is equal with the waist. Then I'm going to pin it down. After pinning it down, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to sew the sides. This is the effect you're going to have at the lower part because the lining is shorter in length than the fabric. So the next thing I'm going to do, this is the sides. I'm going to take to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew 1/2 inch straight down. I'm going to move over to the other side. I'm going to repeat the same thing. You will tucking in all the nets. I'm going to sew while the lower part is facing this way. I'm going to sew 1/2 inch straight down. Then after that, I'm going to remove this pin. Then I will turn the lining to the back. Let me quickly do that and show us the next step to take. I've sewn the sides with lining. This is how the lower part looks like. So the next thing to do, I'm going to remove these pins. Then I'm going to turn the lining to the back. This is how the front body looks like. As you can see, this is the back. This is the lower part. I'm going to give it a good press. So I'm also going to turn my back bodies with lining as well. This is the back bodies of the skirts. This is the lining and this is the fabric. I've sewn that on the lining, as you can see. Then this is the lower part of the skirt. I'm going to take to my sewing machine. Whatever I do to this, I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side of the back bodies. So this is the lower part. I'm going to take to my sewing machine and sew 1/2 inch. After that, I'm going to pull it to be equal with the waist, exactly the way we did on the front bodies. Then after sewing 1/2 inch at the lower part, I'm going to pull it to be equal with the waist, like so. Then I'm going to pin it down. After that, I'm going to sew the zipper allowance with 1/2 inch. I'm also going to sew the sides with 1/2 inch. Then I will turn it to the right side. I've given it a good press. This is the front bodies. It is nice and flat. So the next thing to do, I'm going to stitch this lining to the fabric with 1/4 inch. This is the front. This is the back. I've also given it a good press. This is the back. This is the back bodies. I've also given it a good press. I'm going to stitch this lining down with 1/4 inch. As you can see, it is neatly sewn. This is the upper part of my bodies. I've already made the tutorial in my previous video. I'm going to put the link in the description box below. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to lose this side seam. I'm going to lose it till about 1 inch. I will move over to this side. I will lose it till about 1 inch. Then I will join the front to the front bodies of the skirt. Then I will join the back to the back bodies of the skirts. Then I'm going to fix my zipper. This is the front skirt, so I'm going to place it this way, right side facing each other. Then I'm going to pin it down. I'll take one of the back. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to look at the one that fits each other. I'm going to pin it. After that, I'm going to join the side seam of the skirt with 1 inch seam allowance that is left. I'm going to join the side seam of the skirt with 1 inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to fix my zipper and I'm going to cut a simple basic sleeve and attach to it. Then I will show us the final look. This is the back bodice at the zipper area. The length of my zipper is 24 inches, but I'm going to mark 23 inches. I want my slit opening, I want it to be really high. So I'm going to mark 20 inches for my slit opening. From this end of the zipper, I'm going to measure 1 inch, 1 inch, and I'm going to stop where my slit will start from. So I'll take to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew 1 inch from where my zip will end and stop at where my slit will start from. Then this upper part, I'm going to fix my zipper. After that, I'm going to sew normal basic sleeve and attach to the body, and I will show us the final. This is the final outcome of today's tutorial. As you can see, it is very easy to make. If you want yours to be longer than this, you can also make it depending on your preference. This is the back view. We've come to an end of today's tutorial. If you find my tutorial helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below if you've not done so. I upload weekly tutorial on my channel. Also remember to click on the notification bell so that whenever I upload a new video, you will be notified. Until I come your way next, please stay safe and remain blessed.